tide rise to the occasion. A million tiny flashlights, I gotta turn it on. Coffee and a tide rise to the occasion. A million tiny flashlights, I gotta turn it off. For a while I'll keep my place, but tonight I'll stay so late. Oh, sleep for a while, too much conversation, too much information, I gotta turn it off. Oh, sleep for a while, too much conversation, too much information, I gotta turn it off. For a while I'll keep my place, and tonight I'll stay so late. And here we gotta turn it off. Gotta turn it off. Gotta turn it off.
Just about every time we use the internet, a communication link, or an app, we agree to some very long terms and conditions. But what exactly are we agreeing to?
You guys! You gotta help me. These business casual G-men are trying to kidnap me. What? It's crazy, dude. They're saying it's because I agreed to the latest terms and conditions on iTunes. Why? What did the terms and conditions for the last update say? I don't know. I didn't read them. You didn't read them? Who the hell reads that entire thing every time it pops up? I do.
Can you tell, can Apple tell how many people actually read it?
Well, they have to say that they agree.
Right.
We can't know for sure if they've read. We try to make it in plain English and very short.
If I were trying to make a user agreement uninviting, I would choose a small font, a sans serif font, and I would set it in all caps. Okay. Because what happens then is that you have type that becomes a texture rather than words and spaces.
No one has read the terms and conditions. No one in the world. No one, even the lawyers who wrote it like this.
You come to a website and they have a set of rules, usually described in terms of services, and then they have a privacy policy. And as soon as you start using the service, in essence, you have agreed to the terms of service and the privacy policy.
Do these terms and conditions that we sign up for even apply?
They do. I think if they didn't apply, I think the web would topple over. And so to the extent there have been contract decisions, they've held that these terms and conditions are valid.
And this concept is pretty new. For instance, you never had to sign a user agreement for an old-fashioned landline, or to watch TV, or to read a book. But if you use a smartphone, a Kindle, or you watch Hulu, then you do.
Violet, baby, don't you sign anything there. What's this all about?
Standard form of contract.
Don't talk to me about contracts, Wonka. I use them myself. They're strictly for suckers.
Yes, but you wouldn't begrudge me a little protection.
In fact, if you were to read everything you agreed to, it would take 1 full month of work out of every year. That's 180 hours you would need to spend every year. And according to the Wall Street Journal, consumers lose $250 billion each year due to what's hidden in fine print. Here's an example from LinkedIn's terms. You grant LinkedIn a non-exclusive, irrevocable, worldwide, perpetual, unlimited, assignable, sublicensable, fully paid up, and royalty-free right to us to copy, prepare derivative works of, improve, distribute, publish, remove, retain, add, process, analyze, use, and commercialize in any way known or in the future discovered any information you provide directly or indirectly to LinkedIn, including but not limited to any generate content, ideas, concepts, techniques, or data set services used in LinkedIn without any consent, knowledge, and or competition you or any third party. So LinkedIn takes pretty much everything forever. You'll find this kind of language in Google, Pinterest, Facebook, pretty much anything that people consider free.
Instagram is finding that pictures are worth much more than 1,000 angry words after the company updated its user agreement to say it would have the right to sell posted photos without compensation for use in advertising.
And even if you are paying, companies have the ability to make you accept just about whatever they please. In 2009, GameStation, a company in the UK, put some pretty sneaky stuff in their terms. They didn't take money or your firstborn child. But for one day, their terms stated, by placing an order via this website, you agree to grant us a non-transferable option to claim, now and forevermore, your immortal soul. The contract was only live for a day, but GameStation happened to rake in the lives of 7,000 immortal souls. This was, of course, a joke. However, it makes you wonder, what if there were more serious consequences that might result from not reading terms and conditions?
And what if your phone came with these long terms and conditions said, well, if you use the phone, the government can wiretap you? That would be insane. But that's the kind of world we're living in.
A world where the government could wiretap you because of terms and conditions? So, if you look at the iPhone user agreement, wiretapping isn't mentioned. But in AT&T's privacy policy, they say that they can use data to investigate, prevent, or take action regarding illegal activities. Prevent? In 1994, Pizza Hut became the first major chain to accept a delivery online. Suddenly, the internet needed a way to remember who you were, where you lived, and how you were going to pay.
My question is, what the hell?
Like, how do they know who you are?
Yeah.
Okay. There are these things called cookies, where, like, if you go to a site and buy something, it'll remember you and then create ads for other stuff you might want to buy.
So it learns information about me? Seems like an invasion of privacy.
It wasn't until the late 90s that companies began voluntarily adding privacy policies to explain what was happening with this data. Then, in 2000, an online company called ToySmart went bankrupt. But they had an idea. They tried to sell their database of 195,000 users to another company. This included names, billing information, shopping preferences, and family profiles, even though their privacy policy said they would never share information. People felt like they were being duped.
Lawmakers tell you time and time again that every time they go back to the district, to their district, people are telling them that they want some internet privacy laws. They want some protection.
In early 2001, over a dozen bills were introduced in Congress to protect privacy online.
These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed.
All of the privacy legislation was killed or abandoned, and the Patriot Act was, of course, initiated.
The bill before me takes account of the new realities and dangers posed by modern terrorists. This new law that I signed today will allow surveillance of all communications used by terrorists, including emails, the internet, and cell phones.
The Patriot Act expanded the ability of the federal government to do surveillance in a lot of little ways. You don't need a judge's approval, for instance, to find out what website someone visited, what search terms they typed into Google.
The question of your, if you will, information being retained by Google is not really at this point a Google decision. It's really a political or public policy decision enforced by different governments in different ways.
What if privacy policies weren't about protecting privacy at all, but rather taking it away? Let's take a look at Google's privacy policy around this time to see if any changes were made. Google claims this is their first privacy policy, which it isn't. So why would Google not include its original privacy policy on its own archives page, one that said you would remain anonymous? What if the data collection that the Patriot Act required became the foundation of a whole new business model, and the foundation of the modern internet as we know it? Would that be something worth covering up?
Even though we don't write checks to Google, and that's one of the reasons we kind of like the company, it doesn't mean that Google's really free, or that we are free in the liberty sense when we use it.
It might feel very different if Google was effectively a $500 a year service because that's the value of the data that you're providing.
I mean, that was a really critical finding, in that advertising could be, targeted based on information that people were somehow, supplying about themselves. Suddenly, you didn't have to wonder, was somebody watching my commercial? You knew someone clicked on my ad. That meant that they paid attention to it.
In 2012, Google was one of the most valuable stocks in the world. And Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, had become one of the richest men in America.
My job is to help investors figure out for themselves what this thing's worth. So I look at what Facebook has as an asset, which is 900 million people and a ton of data on those people. And I say, if they use 10% of that data, they're going to be the most valuable company ever.
When personal data is worth this much, why would Google or any free internet service be opposed to the data retention that the Patriot Act required? Anonymity wasn't profitable.
The people who are willing to give up a little bit of information in exchange for having access to something that's free or something that's fun, or a free taco. I don't think that ever changes, right? You always want something free. And plenty of people are willing to provide information to get that.
And plenty of companies picked up on this fact.
Let me give you some very practical tips. First of all, I want everybody here to be careful about what you post on Facebook.
What the default settings are on Facebook. This is how most people use this technology. When these companies are building these systems, they know that.
So why isn't the default for everything sharing, every photo, when I start Facebook, why isn't it just for my friends? Why is the default for everybody? Because it's really confusing for my mom to figure out how to just share to her friends.
The way we've designed the site is that it's a community thing, right? So people want to share with just their friends, but a lot of people also want to share with the community around them, right? So I want to share with everyone who works with me at Facebook. I want to share with everyone who went to my college, everyone in the village around me. And those people aren't just my friends.
Even Mark's explanation doesn't make any sense. He says he wants to share with the school, with the quaint village next to him. He doesn't say he wants to share with the entire world. And yet, that's the default.
The challenge with defaults is that you get comfortable with whatever the default is. When the default is public, you actually can adapt really beautifully and deal with it. When the default is private, you can adapt comfortably and deal with it. When the defaults change, that's when problems emerge.
And in fact, that's what Facebook did. In 2009, Facebook made changes to their privacy policy without telling anyone.
Doing a privacy change for 350 million users is a really, it's not the type of thing that a lot of companies would do. We decided that these would be the social norms now, and we just went for it.
You might remember the fan page with over 1 million people who tried to get the policy reversed. What was the big deal, you might ask? Well, over the course of a night, Facebook turned what was once private information into totally public information.
These platforms have an incentive to keep as much information about you and make it as visible as possible.
And almost the question then becomes, what's the less forgivable sin? Having this crazy one-night stand, or not knowing how to use Facebook properly?
Most relationships in your life, it's very good that the other person doesn't know everything you've ever said